The restaurant was alive with the clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, and the soft glow of candlelight flickering across linen tablecloths. It was a Friday night at Bella's Bistro, a cozy, family-run spot tucked away in the heart of Willow Creek, where locals gathered not just for the food but for the warmth of a place that felt like home. Amid the bustle, a young boy in a wheelchair rolled onto the small wooden dance floor, his face lit with a grin so wide it could outshine the moon. His mother, a waitress named Clara, knelt beside him, her apron slightly askew, whispering something that made him laugh. The music shifted, a slow, soulful melody filling the air, and what happened next stopped every heart in the room. The boy, no older than 10, gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, his eyes sparkling with determination, and began to lead his mother in a dance that defied gravity, doubt, and every expectation. Diners paused, forks hovering midair, as Clara swayed gently, letting her son guide her with the subtle movements of his hands and the unyielding joy in his heart. Among the onlookers was Ethan Caldwell, a billionaire whose name was synonymous with power, wealth, and a heart hardened by years of loss. His steel-gray eyes, usually cold and calculating, softened as he watched the scene unfold, and something stirred deep within him, a memory, a longing, a spark of something he thought he'd buried forever. What he did next would leave the town talking for years, but to understand why, we must go back to the beginning, to the moment Clara and her son, Tommy, became the heartbeat of Bella's Bistro. If this story tugs at your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales that remind us what it means to be human. Clara Thompson was no stranger to struggle. At 32, she carried the weight of a life that hadn't gone as planned, yet her smile never faltered, at least not in front of Tommy. Her son was her world, a bright, curious boy born with spinal muscular atrophy, a condition that confined him to a wheelchair but never dimmed his spirit. Clara had worked at Bella's for 6 years, ever since her husband walked out, leaving her to raise Tommy alone. The bistro was more than a job, it was a lifeline. The owner, Maria, treated her like family, and the regulars adored Tommy, who often spent evenings at a corner table, sketching superheroes or charming customers with his quick wit. Clara's days were a blur of serving plates of lasagna, refilling coffee, and rushing home to help Tommy with his physical therapy. But Fridays were special. Friday nights were when Bella's transformed into a haven of music and laughter, with a small dance floor where locals swayed to live acoustic sets. Tommy loved those nights, his eyes tracking every twirl, every step, as if he were out there dancing himself. Clara knew how much he longed to move, to feel the rhythm in his bones, so she made a promise: one day, they'd dance together, no matter what. That promise became their ritual, a secret hope they whispered about under the stars. Tonight, as the band played a cover of "Stand By Me," Clara felt a tug at her heart. Tommy's eyes were brighter than usual, his hands fidgeting with excitement. "Mom," he whispered, "can we try it tonight?" Clara hesitated, glancing at the crowded dining room. She was on shift, her apron stained with marinara, her hair slipping from its bun. But Tommy's smile was a force of nature, and she couldn't say no. She wheeled him to the edge of the dance floor, ignoring the curious glances from diners, and knelt beside him. "You lead, champ," she said, her voice thick with love. And so, they danced, Tommy guiding her with gentle pushes of his wheelchair, Clara swaying too. His rhythm, their laughter weaving into the music like a thread of gold. Ethan Caldwell wasn't supposed to be at Bella's that night. The billionaire CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, a conglomerate that spanned tech, real estate, and renewable energy, rarely ventured into small-town diners. His world was one of glass towers, private jets, and boardrooms where his word was law. But fate, or perhaps a whim, had brought him to Willow Creek. He'd been driving through on his way to a retreat in the mountains, seeking solitude after a grueling week of negotiations. His driver had suggested Bella's for a quick meal, promising it was the best-kept secret in town. Ethan, skeptical but too tired to argue, agreed. He sat alone at a corner table, his tailored suit out of place among the casual crowd, his mind still churning over spreadsheets and stock prices. His daughter, Lily, was the only softness in his life, but even she felt distant lately, a 16-year-old caught between her father's wealth and her own search for meaning. Ethan hadn't danced since his wife, Emily, passed away 8 years ago, a loss that had carved a hollow space in his chest. He avoided places like Bella's, where memories of her laughter lingered like ghosts. Yet here he was, watching a waitress and her son create something so pure, so alive, that it cracked the armor around his heart. Clara's movements were clumsy at first, adjusting to Tommy's lead, but there was a grace in her surrender, a beauty in the way she let her son shine. Ethan's fork rested on his plate, untouched, as he leaned forward, captivated. He saw Emily in Clara's devotion, Lily in Tommy's fearless joy. For the first time in years, he felt something other than ambition, a longing to be part of something real. Clara didn't notice Ethan at first. She was too focused on Tommy, on the way his hands moved with purpose, the way his laughter bubbled up like a spring. The other diners began to clap softly, some wiping tears, others smiling as if they'd witnessed a small miracle. Maria, wiping her hands on a dish towel, stood at the counter, her eyes misty. "That's my Clara," she murmured to a server. But Ethan saw more than a moment, he saw a story. He saw a mother who'd given everything, a boy who refused to be defined by his limitations, and a community that held them close. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of a late-night call with investors, but he ignored it. Instead, he watched as Clara spun Tommy's chair in a gentle circle, her laughter mingling with his. The song ended, and the room erupted in applause. Clara's cheeks flushed as she wheeled Tommy back to his table, brushing off compliments with a shy smile. "Just a little fun," she said to a regular who called her a hero. But Ethan knew better. He'd seen heroes in boardrooms, in war rooms, in headlines. This was different. This was courage in its rawest form, and it stirred something in him he couldn't name. As the night wore on, Ethan lingered, his coffee growing cold. He watched Clara move through the restaurant, refilling drinks, joking with customers, checking on Tommy. There was a quiet strength in her, a resilience that reminded him of Emily. His wife had been a dancer, not professionally, but in the way she lived, every step deliberate, every moment infused with grace. Losing her to cancer had shattered Ethan, leaving him to raise Lily alone while building an empire to drown his grief. But watching Clara and Tommy, he felt a pang of regret. He'd been so focused on protecting Lily from pain that he'd forgotten to teach her how to live with it, how to find joy in the cracks. He glanced at his watch, then back at Clara, who was now clearing a table, her hands steady despite the long shift. An idea began to form, reckless and uncharacteristic, but it took root like a seed in fertile soil. He signaled for the check, his mind racing. He could leave a generous tip, walk away, and let this moment fade. Or he could do something extraordinary, something that would change everything. Clara noticed the man in the suit only when she brought his bill. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with sharp features softened by a sadness she couldn't place. His eyes held hers a moment too long, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that felt like he was seeing her, really seeing her. "Great place," he said, his voice low and measured. "Your son, he's something special." Clara smiled, used to compliments about Tommy. "He's my hero," she said simply, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Ethan nodded, sliding a $100 bill under the check for a $20 meal. "Keep the change," he said, standing to leave. Clara's eyes widened, but before she could protest, he was gone, his black SUV pulling away into the night. She shook her head, assuming he was just another wealthy stranger passing through. But Ethan Caldwell wasn't done with Bella's Bistro, or with Clara and Tommy. As he drove into the darkness, his mind was made up. He'd seen something worth investing in, not with money, but with something far more valuable. What he did next would turn Willow Creek upside down, but that's a story for the next chapter. If this tale of heart and hope has moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel to find out what happens next.